So these guys will both jump between 120, 125 in the morning. Most medics, American, are unarmed. British medics are armed. German medics are armed. But Americans can have the choice. We had a corpsman recently who's just going out to Afghanistan, and he's got a pistol, sidearm. He's a corpsman. It is your own preference. But Robert had two rules. No weapons in my aid station. If you're American, I'll watch you bleed to death. I'll watch you die if you break my rule and bring a weapon into my church, into my aid station. The other one is we treat anyone. German, civilian, American. What he's trying to do is keep the aid station safe. If there's no weapons, they're treating everybody, even Germans. There's no reason to attack his aid station. And he keeps those rules throughout the war. Okay. Robert jumps and lands 300 yards that side of the church. He can see the church and comes straight here. The Germans are standing here watching all the aircraft coming over and the paratroopers coming out. They see Robert and ignore him because they're watching him pin a red cross flag on the door. The little door at the church will go in a minute. Robert goes in, starts to set up the aid station. The only supplies the medics came in with was a very small bag, contained morphine, tourniquets, bandages, safety pins. They weren't qualified to stitch, so they had to pin the wounds, and his scissors. And Ken's carrying exactly the same stuff. Ken lands 800 yards that way. He's back and forth in hedgerow country. He doesn't even find the village. There are 3 medics per company. These two will never serve again throughout the war in the same aid station. Okay? Quite often you're on your own. The other medic was Bob's best friend and was wearing Bob's shirt because he had an allergy to wool. So he jumped in wearing Bob's Class A dress shirt, cotton. When Robert left here, he saw him hanging in a tree, the top half with his pelvis and legs on the floor below. He'd obviously landed in the tree and the German patroller walked past and just machine gunned him and cut him in half. Not anti-aircraft fire because the legs would be nowhere near the top half of the body. So he was obviously still hanging in the tree when they did it. Yeah, Ken arrives here about dawn. Okay, as the 326th Combat Engineers are coming up that lane off of Drop Zone D. Both medics speak to the engineers and say, if you're going back on the drop zone, please don't just look for food, ammunition, weapons. If you find any medical drop bundles, bring them here. None will ever arrive. Afternoon of D-Day, Ken's out again. Charles Anderson, he's in no man's land across a 50-yard field, shot in the shoulder. The way Ken got round there, he ends up on the German lines, not the American. He crawled out under fire, neither side would cease fire for him, but he pulled Charles off the battlefield. When he got Charles on the handcart, Charles was struck in the head with an American bullet. It's not aimed, it's amazing it even got through the hedgerow without sticking in a branch or a tree trunk or whatever. He never lost consciousness. Ken got him back and put him on his back. When he came in early afternoon, Bob described the church, people laying on the pews, head to the centre, feet to the wall or sitting, people laying on the floor. This was absolutely tacky with blood. But there are people lying on here, on these cold tiles. 80 critically injured wounded are here at this point. Remember, they should have all been taken away by the surgeon and the doctor. The only space left on the afternoon of D-Day was the altar. So that's where Ken laid him down. He cleaned and dressed his wounds and went to make him a cup of hot bouillon or beef stock. When he got back, Charles just said, I'm not going to need it. I'm not going to make it. Give it to somebody else. He was dead within about 4 hours from loss of blood, so much so that the blood all soaked into the stones on the altar, which is why they rendered over the blood. It wouldn't come off. That's 2 dead. They lost another guy, Mouse, The pews that face across the church on the right face that way. We only know his nickname, we don't know. 506. They take Vierville shortly after noon, and you now have 3 tanks coming down the road that we're going to leave on. You have Dog Company in the field on this side, heading for the church, Easy on the left, coming in for the village itself. Fox is on the other side of there. So 2nd Battalion of the 506 Parachute Infantry. The lead tank blows in these 2 doors and then starts putting 30 and 50 caliber rounds straight through that top window, which are ricocheting off the inside of this church. Bear in mind, all they can see outside are German Fallschirmjäger in the church grounds. They haven't got a clue this is an aid station. Now, the sign for friendlies at distance, it was initially given to the paratroopers and the infantry assault units in case of strafing by their own aircraft. So the infantry have orange smoke grenades, but the paratroopers were issued orange marker panels. Ken and Robert were waving those out the windows, but that's not stopping the tanks. When they come into a built-up area, they shut the hatches. They're operating off small periscopes, and they're looking for what's pinging off the tank, who's firing them, and have they got anything bigger that could do them some real harm. As the tanks move down, they're now broadside inside the church, taking all these windows out, stripping off all that plaster, and 50 and 30 cows are all coming down this way. Paratroopers, as in 506, move over into the graveyard. Now the Fallschirmjäger have got nowhere to go. They won't come in here, their own wounded are in here, and they've respected this as an aid station the whole time. They end up moving out behind the church over onto what was Drop Zone D and make their getaway. Okay. No one's ever interviewed a Fallschirmjäger that was in this village. There was an old Frenchman sitting there with his wife last year. At the end of my talk, he tapped me on the shoulder and went, "Fallschirmjäger ici." I only got time to get his name. 2nd Company, 6th Fallschirmjäger. I thought he was French, but he was a Fallschirmjäger from here. We're trying to track him down now. A paratrooper ran past the door. Robert grabbed him. Straight away the guy realised there's friendlies in here. He ran out to the back of one of the tanks that are still firing in here all the way down the side of the church. On the back of the American tanks there's a phone for close support infantry to speak to the guys inside. As soon as they're advised it's friendlies, they cease fire immediately. They also put the call in for trucks to be sent to the front to evacuate the wounded. Remember these 2 guys, 18 and 19, 3 weeks for one day training for the other. Everything they were told, drop zone surgeon, doctors, stretcher bearers to come, nothing. They held this aid station in amongst the battle that was raging for pretty much 2 days. They'd stay here for another day because the 501st was still in combat that way. This was actually the first time both of them had seen a real casualty. I mentioned the bits in the church. All the dark marks on the pews are all stains. The parachute silk didn't stop the blood. That's the back wound.